welcome to Aviate Africa. Coming up on the show, we look at Denal's growing status in the global defense industry, and we'll also speak to the CEO of the Air Traffic and Navigation Services Company on human factors and safety in aviation.
Welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Thank you so much for your time. Briefly take us through the work and responsibilities of ATNS.
Okay, ATNS is actually standing for Air Traffic and Navigation Services Organization. It is a company that is owned by government through the Department of Transport, which its sole responsibility is to manage the South African airspace and the delegated airspace. Most people know it as the provision of air traffic control, which is really the separation of aircrafts. We do that in the South African continental airspace and also provide the services to about halfway towards Brazil and halfway towards Australia, as well as right down to the South Pole. It's quite a wide area, which is about 10% of the world's airspace, which totals to about 22 million square kilometers.
What would you say so far has been the greatest achievement of ATNS?
ATNS was established in 1993. It used to be, this provision used to be provided under the Department of Transport inside the department. And it was commercialized in 1993. Since then, ATNS as a state-owned company has been self-sustaining and has grown from a mere 300 employees, which just now have just over about 1,100 employees, which we've created about 700 quality jobs in the country, having increased our asset base from just about 300 million to about 1.8 billion rands currently, and it's still growing into the future. We have established a very good footprint in the continent, in Africa, and we are a company that is recognized globally now in Africa in the service provision of ATM.
When you look at some of the important work that you do, from a skills perspective and young graduates coming in, what is the intake like? Are you going through a skills shortage, or are you able to balance it out by getting graduates coming in and training programs, etc.?
Well, we've got different areas of where we bring people into the organization. When you look at the air traffic services area, we bring people from grade 12, which is standard 10 metric. And those people, of course, we get them from the same pool of the people who have matriculated in that year. We look at people who got good marks in maths and science, of which we compete with other industries. So from a skills-based perspective, yes, we are continuously at a shortage. It is a global shortage, and there's also a shortage in South Africa. So we are continuously recruiting, in particular women and previously disadvantaged individuals. We are not there yet. We're still going to take some time to be able to normalize the area in terms of recruitment.
In your opinion, what would you say are some of the ways we can, or some of the policies rather, we can implement in creating sustainable opportunities in African aviation industry?
I think firstly we need to understand our own environment. In Africa, we've quite a lot looked at what solutions have been provided somewhere else, like in Europe and other Western countries, and copied them to Africa. And that, what has shown in the past is that the solutions that have been designed for other areas are not necessarily applicable in our environment. So we do really need to adopt a situation where we address the situations in Africa using African solutions. And I think once we can understand the environment, then we can be able to design and develop systems and mechanisms of addressing the specific issues that we face in Africa. So I think it's set in an institutional area where we really need to develop those things at governmental environment where we can be able to come up with specific interventions to address the issues that we face in Africa.
When you look at your hierarchy, perhaps, of challenges that need to be addressed, where does safety fall in when you look at from an African perspective in aviation?
Well, safety is certainly one of the key areas that we focus on, and it's our prime product. That's what we call it. That's what we provide in terms of our service provision. It is interesting if you look at the stats in that if you look at global traffic, only 3% of global traffic comes to Africa, to the African continent. However, if you look at the safety stats, more than 80% of accidents and incidents are happening in Africa. So the stats are skewed. So it's very, 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 very important that then we focus on safety in Africa by deploying the correct infrastructure on the ground and otherwise, and the right technologies, so that we can be able to ensure that there is safety in the continent. I think for us as in South Africa, we are in a specific environment in that South Africa is right at the bottom of the continent. So for all the trade and what we do with other countries, which comes mostly from the north, specifically from Europe, all those flights have to crisscross and go over other airspaces before they go to South Africa. And the safety aspects and the infrastructure on the ground in terms of their navigation into South Africa then becomes important, of which leads into a space where what the roles that we play as ATNS in South Africa in particular, to ensure that the routes that come to the country are safe, and that people can come and do business here or can come and visit the country for leisure reasons and whatever reason others that they can come to the country for.
When we hear the term human factors, it comes across as such a broad term. From your point of view, what exactly are we talking about when we say human factors in aviation?
Well, human factors, as I think the words themselves say, we're dealing with humans and we change every day. You wake up one day moody, one day something has happened in your life. Maybe you're driving to work and then you see an accident on the road that affects you mentally. And that has an impact on an individual when you're doing your work later, or whatever circumstances that you've been exposed in. So the human factor element then is very critical to the decision-making process, of which is really the bulk of the work that is being done by the air traffic controllers, because the concentration is of paramount and when they are doing their job. So human factors play a very, very big role. That is the state of mind on how the air traffic controller feels at that moment in time. We have been doing studies, of which some of them actually have been unique. We started them in South Africa. No other country that we know of has done those studies, of which was looking specifically on the state of mind of the individuals. Because usually what we look at is whether we've got high blood pressure, or all the other areas of which we can measure medically. But we haven't looked in the past in aviation on what is the state of mind for air traffic controllers. And I'm sure you will know and have seen what has happened in the aviation industry, of what we have seen people, especially on the pilot side, and which showing that there's more and more need to actually understand what is the state of mind of people who are operating at the technical level in aviation.
Just to go back to the topic about the graduates and the intakes, etc., when you look at the gender diversification in aviation, where are we sitting probably compared to our counterparts globally?
I would say probably just looking at South Africa itself, we're still far, very, very far from what we're supposed to be. We are about 51, 52% bill in terms of gender, in terms of the population. In aviation, there's very few women who are in the space. In our business and air traffic management, certainly we've made some strides. We're currently sitting at around 46% of the whole employee population. However, I think there's more to be done and which we can improve on, especially at the higher levels of responsibility and positions in the organization. Globally, I think we are certainly doing much better than in other areas, of which I believe they do not really have much focus in those areas. In South Africa, at least, we are focused on gender and making sure that there's more women who are in representation in the business.
What would you like to see in the industry in your tenure as CEO?
For me, I think this industry has got more or less a 10-year planning life cycle. And what we do today really is also looking forward to making sure that we are planting a tree today so that someone can have a shade in 10 years' time. So one of the things that we see right now, especially with the explosion of technology, we are moving away from a situation where the business has been human resource intensive and to be more technology intensive. And the challenge really is to balance that on saying, with the challenges that we're having in the country in terms of the unemployment, inequality and poverty, and how do you balance that in making sure that this global industry as South Africa, that we're also competitive, where you're having the application of technology which will make things more cheaper and requiring less human resources. So I think going forward, that's one of the areas that we have to retrain and reskill, and making sure that everyone who's coming up and taking up jobs in the industry, that they have the right skills and the right qualifications so that they can be able to be employable and participate in the economy of the country.
What will be some of the main objectives in 2016 for your organization?
It's been sustainability and growth. We're currently facing a situation in South Africa where the growth in air traffic movements, of which really is where we get our revenues, it's kind of tapering off and it's almost flat. So we have been forced that whilst on one side the cost of doing business and the operating costs are increasing, then we need to look at other areas where we can get revenue streams. So our focus area specifically for 2016 is to ensure that we put the platforms and the environment where the business can expand into other areas on the continent, so that we can be able to increase the revenue streams.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you.